My name is Thomas. I'm a sales engineer at HiBob, and my role technically is making sure that we can bridge gap between current challenges and future challenges, and hopefully we can do that with Bob. So for today, before to dive in, I really want to take a moment to thank you all. You know that everyone has a packed agenda. It's also New Year's Eve, so there are a lot of things that needs to be covered, but we have a very engaging session for today led by Rebecca. So maybe the first question you can ask is, why are we here? Well, if you're on HR or any decision-making role, you face sometimes the challenge to justify HR investment technology. I think we often see HR, and myself talking to prospects as well, that tech HR is often seen as a cost center, but we can really change that. And that's what Rebecca is going to show us today, that by investing to the right HR technology, we can not only focusing on reducing the cost, but really bringing value. How do we make sure that we can have this influential HR, not only for HR, but for the whole organization? And of course, having strategic outcome with that. So for today, just a bit of housekeeping. So we're going to have around 45 minutes. Rebecca is going to ask you questions, some polls as well. But at the end, we're going to have a 15 minutes Q&A as well. So if you have questions during the webinar, feel free to drop them into the chat box and we will answer them at the end or during the presentation. Also, we're going to provide you a recording of the session. So any resources that you see today, we can share that after the webinar. So enjoy, take notes, engage with us. And again, we're going to provide some information. So now I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Rebecca Wettemann, Principal Analyst at Valoir. So Rebecca has been recognized as an expert in HR technology, decade of experience on advising organizations to maximize ROI on HR solutions. So today she's going to guide us through the process, how we can build the HR case, how we make sure that we have the right actionable insights and make the best decision possible for your organization and your objective. Rebecca, happy to welcome you. The stage is yours.
Thomas, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm delighted to be here to spend some time talking to you about how do you really build the business case for HR agility? And how do we think about as HR leaders, building a business case that is not just to justify budget, but to really be that guide, be that roadmap for making sure you both maximize the value you get from your HR technology and you can prove the value that you're getting over time. There we go. So as Thomas mentioned, Valoir is an independent analyst firm, been in the business a long time, helping customers build the business case for their HR technology investments and really helping customers understand beyond the walls of HR, how to articulate the value that their HR technology decisions deliver to the business. So today I want to talk a little bit about some of the research that we've done on Bob and some of the experiences that we've seen with HiBob customers, the truth about business cases, and maybe some different ways to think about business cases than you necessarily have before, the 4 steps to building a successful business case, the 4 Ps that can help you identify the areas of greatest potential benefits, some measurement techniques, some ways to think about how do you quantify and estimate those potential benefits, even though you haven't experienced them before, and then some best practices as you think about building your own business case for your HR technology investments. So first, let's talk about our research on HiBob. So a lot of what we do in helping customers build the business case for technology is research on what other customers have actually achieved from technology. So last summer, we had in-depth conversations with a number of HiBob customers in different geographies and different industries of different sizes to really understand what their decision process was, why they chose HiBob, what their deployment experience was, and then really what benefits they had achieved. And what we found Key benefits, not going to be a surprise to anyone sitting here today: increased HR staff productivity, increased manager productivity, improved technology management, really being able to deliver more from their HR technology stack than they had before, increased visibility, and then reduced risk. Now that's great, and you'll see from Bob in the future some of the results of our research as that's published, but key themes that we found in Bob's value proposition. Obviously, ease of use, the ability to deliver more capabilities over time, and enabling users to use it without a lot of training. Super important, particularly when you have folks who aren't necessarily in the application every day, like HR, right? Rapid time to value, the ability of internal teams, HR teams who weren't necessarily technology experts, to be able to learn along with the HiBob team during the deployment process, and then be able to do a lot of future configuration, a lot of changes on their own without the need for outside consultants. Super important. And finally, that flexibility and that usability really enabling HR leaders to deliver ongoing innovation, both because HiBob is investing in new capabilities all the time and adding new capabilities to the software, but also the ability of those HR leaders to change, adapt, adopt, expand the capabilities that HiBob delivers without, again, needing to bring in those outside IT folks or technology specialists to be able to adopt. So really both ease of use for ongoing benefit, rapid time to value for early benefit, and then ongoing innovation, again, for that ongoing benefit, to be able to take advantage of new capabilities in the software and to be able to adapt Bob as they needed, as their business grew or their needs changed. So what does that mean for us as we're thinking about building business case? Well, that's all well and good, but looking at what somebody else has done doesn't necessarily help you put numbers in front of what you're going to do from a business case perspective. And we think about why building a business case, we're often talking about building it to get budget, right? That's the most common answer. But if you build a business case that is designed not just to get budget, but to be that ongoing roadmap for the future, you can use it to help you prioritize projects, to plan for success, but perhaps most importantly, to show the value that you deliver on an ongoing basis for the company. So that brings us to our first poll question. What is the biggest challenge you face in building a business case for technology? We'll give everybody a moment to answer. Some of the challenges we've listed as opportunities: getting good data, calculating metrics, getting buy-in, or something else. What do you think, Thomas? We'll give them just a minute to chime in. What are you hearing from customers?
I think often the main challenge that we see from customers is really finding the right metrics. How do you calculate the metrics? What is a metric at the end? Every company has different metrics. So how do you identify the most crucial one and how do you calculate it?
Yeah, it's
So
that data and metrics. Oh,
exactly.
interesting. Buy-in came in a little bit higher from our audience here. Okay. 50% getting buy-in. But I think the two really go hand in hand, right? Because I get the metrics, but then somebody else says, well, I don't know if that metric's really true or not, right? So getting the metrics and getting buy-in are very much sort of interrelated as I think about moving forward. So why are business cases hard? Right? To your point, Thomas, first people say, well, we don't have the data. We've got to go out and measure, or we're not sure if the data is accurate. We're not sure. I think that the other thing that people sometimes don't think about is we're actually guessing, right? By nature, because we haven't put in the technology yet, we're estimating about something that we haven't done before, which makes that hard, particularly for those of us in HR who are very focused on having correct answers and accurate data and being right about the data, right? And finally, I think the other thing is that HR cases, certainly today, are largely about indirect benefits, right? Nobody's automating payroll to save on time cards anymore. A lot of things are about productivity, about increased employee engagement, about quality of employee experience. about quality of information provided to managers. Those are all things that by nature are indirect benefits and somewhat more of a challenge for us to quantify. So as I think we skipped a slide there. Why are HR business cases harder? I'll let you folks in a little secret. Having done business cases with customers for a long time, not just in HR, but in other application areas, we give ourselves a harder time than any other departments or colleagues in building the business case for technology, right? If I'm building a business case for a sales automation application or a marketing application, sales and marketing leaders think about things like productivity as opportunities for growth, right? How do I do more with less? How do I get more out of my budget? In HR, we tend to think about it more in terms of headcount, right? How am I going to justify this in terms of personnel savings? So it becomes a more difficult and more challenging issue to think about from an HR perspective. I will tell you too that in HR, because we're so conscious of the importance of data and our role as the stewards of data, we tend to be much more cautious about estimating benefits. Sales and marketing folks will talk about their potential benefits, take a guess and go. Whereas in HR, we tend to be much more cautious about making sure we have the right data, the right numbers, and that we're not just guessing. The other thing is because so many HR applications today are really about broader benefits beyond the walls of HR, we're on the hook for numbers we can't necessarily control, right? Like employee turnover, like employee productivity that's driven by greater management visibility, those sorts of things that are really beyond the walls of HR and make it harder for us to think about a business case when they're numbers that ultimately we have very little control over. We can hope that the technology will influence these capabilities, but it really depends on a lot of other moving parts within the organization. Go back to what we said about the data and the information for a minute. So what makes a good return on investment? If you're thinking about the business case for a technology project, what ROI makes you go, great, I want to take this to my boss right away because I know this is going to be a good investment decision for the company and I'm likely to get budget for it. Just want you all to think about this for a minute. What is a good ROI? Is it 5%? 545%? 4,545%? Thomas, I see you laughing. What is a good ROI? What's a good ROI that we're looking for an HR technology project? Give everybody just a moment to answer.
We can't vote for everything, but I would definitely pick everything if I could.
Why is that, Thomas? Because every customer is different, or?
Yeah, exactly. And it depends what's, ROI on what, right? What's the return in terms of percentage? What is behind this number? So it's for me, 5% might have a bigger impact on the organization than 5,000 percent, for example.
Let's see what people said. 5 and 45%. So folks, I'll confess, this is a little bit of a trick question, right? Because the answer is, it is not about the number. To Thomas's point, it's about having an understanding of what the costs and benefits are and how you're going to get there. It's about having that structured understanding of what are the areas of greatest benefit, where do I need to watch my costs, and how am I going to focus on my adoption and training efforts to make sure I maximize the value for my technology project. So how do I do that? So let's talk through the 4 steps to building a business case. Here they are. Identify the top areas of benefit, estimate costs and benefits, calculate key metrics, and then the 4th, and perhaps the most important step, presenting and planning your business case. So let's go through these in a little more detail. First, you want to use the 4 Ps to identify the top areas of benefit. Often when we're thinking about a project like a big HR technology investment, there are a number of different people, processes, activities that the application is going to impact. What you want to do is write those potential impacts down and then rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 on people, process, price, and potential. Let's talk through that. People, how many people will the application touch? Process, how often will it touch them? Price, how costly is whatever you're doing now? And finally, potential. What is the alternative to the technology? And what does that look like from a cost and benefit perspective? So let's walk through how this works in practice. Here's an example. This is an example we found with HiBob customers that it enabled non-technical users to make changes to the system, increasing general HR staff productivity by 1.25 to 12%. Now, as you think about this in your own organization, how many people are we talking about? Probably the HR team, right? What's the process? How often do you want to or will you make changes to the HR system? Price. How costly is it for you to do those sorts of things with your current systems and applications? And then potential. What's the alternative? Without HiBob, what would you have to do or how much would you have to spend to get there? Let's take another example. Improve technology management. We found that organizations moving to HiBob could really spend a lot less supporting their applications on an ongoing basis. You'll want to think about for your own organization, how many people does that mean? What's the process? How often does it happen? Price, how costly is that alternative? What could be a lot for consulting fees for other kinds of applications? And then what's the alternative? So as you see, if you have that list of potential benefits that you're thinking about, if you rate them in terms of people, process, price, and potential, you can quickly identify where you're likely to get the greatest returns from your HR technology investment. That's where you want to focus your deployment efforts, your adoption efforts, and finally, measuring where you're likely to get the greatest success. The second step is estimating costs and benefits. Cost tends to be the easy part, right? You get a quote from your vendor. You think about how much personnel time is going to be involved in your deployment plan. You think about how much it's going to cost and how much it's going to take to actually train employees. Benefits tend to be the tough part, so I want to spend a little bit more time on that. With benefits, there are the direct ones, the cost savings, and then the indirect ones, things like productivity, quality, improved employee experience. Direct benefits tend to be the easier ones to measure, right? They're typically a line item in somebody's budget that changes or goes away. You should think about direct benefits also, though, as the ability to do new things without more people. The cost avoidance of not having to grow your team because technology can enable automation of labor-intensive HR practices. It's the indirect benefits and often the ones that go beyond the HR organization where we tend to get tripped up, right? Things like productivity, quality, engagement. These are important things to quantify because they do have a real impact on the business, but they usually have a few ands in the benefit statement, like I enable more effective employees because managers are more effective, are more effective, and they're better at managing their teams, right? So they tend to be a bit more of a challenge to quantify. Should you include those benefits like productivity in business cases? That brings us to our third poll question. We'll go ahead and pull it up now. What do you think, Thomas? Is productivity a good business case for HR?
Well, it depends what productivity means, right? I think everyone I talk to, each time you ask what productivity means, it's a bit like everything and nothing. So if you have indeed, I would say, good data and evidence, I think why not? But productivity is a bit kind of something that you put everything into it nowadays. So I would say more like toward the end, yeah. If we have support and evidence, yeah.
You are right, and you're with the audience, right?
Good.
Everybody says, or 71% of people say, if you have good supporting data and evidence. And that's the big challenge here, folks, right? Because often we don't, right? We're thinking about things like reducing employee turnover. Well, we haven't put in the technology yet. So what's the data we're going to use to measure that? Or we're thinking something more broadly about employee engagement and productivity, and we don't necessarily have the data. So a couple of tips on thinking about getting to that better data, and then we'll talk about what to do if you don't have any data. When you think about productivity savings, the challenge here, folks, is that we have been overpromised for years on the potential benefit of technology for our business, because we've assumed that just because we introduce technology, that humans are going to adopt it. And not only that, but they're actually going to use it to their benefit. And that doesn't always happen. So whenever we think about calculating productivity savings, we want to think about humans as inefficient machines. A technical term for this is people goof off. I save 30 minutes, I Google myself. I save an hour, I'll have another coffee. I save 2 hours, let's go out to lunch. Humans do not transfer time efficiently. So anytime you think about productivity savings, you want to first estimate the time savings. How much time will people actually save from using an application? And then use a correction coefficient to account for those human factors, assuming that not all the time saved is going to translate into additional time worked and additional value for the company. So how does that work? You're converting the time saved into additional value for the company, reflecting the fact that humans don't transfer time efficiently. And you use that coefficient based on what the role is, what the motivation is, what the compensation is, what the location is of the employee. We tell clients that 0.5 is a good place to start. So for every hour saved, assume people are only working additional 30 minutes. But this really differs, right? Based on compensation, based on motivation. Highly supervised workers tend to be closer to 1. Salespeople working on a highly variable commission basis tend to be closer to 1. Managers and marketers, sorry, tend to be closer to 0.5, but you want to use those productivity correction coefficients as you're thinking about what is the time saved for different groups in your organization, and where is that to actually likely turn into value. So here's an example. If we believe 10 people on the HR team will save an hour a week at a salary of $100,000 a year, fully loaded cost of $135,000 gives me an hourly cost of $65. I'm going to use a correction of factor of 0.5, and you can see we've just done some basic math here. To save 10 people on the HR team an hour a week gives me to an annual benefit of $15,600. This is a really good way to present things like productivity savings, because it really enables you to have that internal conversation about how much time do we really believe people will save, the impact of the technology, and how much value they actually deliver. This is a great way to have a conversation about the correction factors and how you actually expect to put these benefits into action within your organization, rather than just guessing about a benefit number. Now, that's great if everyone can agree on a time savings, but what if you can't measure it? What if you have no data at all? It often happens, HR will come to us and say, well, we'd love to build a business case, but we'd have to go out and gather all this data. Not necessarily true. Let's talk a little bit about how to measure benefits if you don't have the data. A couple of zero data estimation techniques. First, the cost of the alternative. Second, what I call bigger than a bread box. And third, don't count it. Let's talk through those. First, the cost of the alternative. And this is a very real thing we're seeing in HR today. How many additional HR people or other employees would I have to hire to achieve the same result? In a lot of cases, particularly we're looking at organizations that have older systems or more labor-intensive systems, or that require more technical expertise to support. They're looking at, I need to make changes to my HR system. I need to be agile, but I would need to bring in consultants or to recruit and pay more highly trained technology experts to able to deliver those same results. So that's one way to think about it. Another way, bigger than a bread box. This is a great one when you're thinking about broader technology benefits for the organization and things like employee turnover, for example. If we all know that the technology we're deploying is going to support employee engagement, can we agree that it's going to reduce turnover? Well, everybody would probably say, yes, if it's a more engaging system, it has the potential to reduce turnover. Well, by how much? Well, we have no idea, right? Because we haven't done it yet. But can we all agree that if we have 20% turnover today, we're going to be able to reduce it by at least 5%? We all know the 5% number isn't likely right? But we all can agree that it's not too high. So then we've effectively estimated a benefit without having any data. And then we want to look at, what's the cost, what would be the cost to hire those new employees that we're replacing, to hire, onboard, recruit them. And that gives us a benefit number without actually having to gather any data. We know we're underestimating it because we've all agreed we've got a lowball number, right? But it actually gives us a quantifiable metric to build a business case around. And finally, don't count it. Remember, we talked about that list of benefits that you were putting together? The best business cases only have 3 or 4 benefits. So if you have some that are harder to count or maybe beyond the bigger than a bread box technique, you can still talk about them as you present your business case, but not counting in the business case just makes your business case stronger. So it's great to be able to say we haven't quantified all the potential benefits from this project. We focused on the top ones in terms of the 4 Ps. Once you have identified those area of real benefits and estimated those benefits, you want to calculate your key metrics. With clients, we use return on investment, but we also use payback, right? Because that's the key measure of risk and agility. It tells you when you'll have that money back when you break even, so you can afford then to invest in other projects. Often clients will ask me about other metrics. Are there other metrics we should be measuring? My CFO likes to see net present value or internal rate of return. The short answer here is great. Remember, what's not important is the number. What's important is that you have a structured understanding of the costs and benefits. And realistically, you should be talking to your finance department of what kind of metrics and hurdles the CFO or budget committee is looking for so that you can present those numbers and that structure in a way that is going to be most digestible for them. Finally, the fourth and most important step, presenting and planning. You want to talk about milestones and metrics. What is your expected and worst case scenario? What will we measure moving forward? How will we track things like employee engagement, manager productivity? We also want to think about adoption factors, right? If I've identified those top areas of benefit, how do I focus my training plan? How do I focus my communication and marketing plan to get folks excited about the application? How do I focus on providing carrots and not sticks for every individual user to show what's in it for them by adopting the system? Do they get to spend less time with HR? Do they have more visibility into their benefits? Do they have more opportunities to grow within the organization? You'll want to think about not just training on how to use the application, but a communication plan that really focuses on what's in it for that end user. And finally, you want to think about barriers to adoption. Any HR technology change, particularly modernization, means you're making changes in the way managers get data, in the way HR manages data, in the way employees access data, the way everyone works together. So you want to think about, are there structural or cultural or political barriers to providing access to information in new ways that may provide greater visibility, but also greater vulnerability for certain groups in your organization? A couple of tips on presenting and planning. We talked a little bit about carrots and sticks, but you want to use that business case to really communicate up to upper management to get down, but also down to the broader employee community, letting them know the business case that is not just for HR benefit, but for everyone's benefit. Keeping a close eye on what's in it for me, what's in it for those individual end users, what's in it for managers. Will they have to go to a system now when they used to be able to go and ask HR for information? Yes, but will they have it at their fingertips whenever they want? Yes, thinking through those issues and what's in it for each of the impacted groups in your organization is super important. And finally, as you think about presenting and planning your potential investment for HR agility, you want to think about MOM. Thomas, I won't put you on the hook and ask you if you know what this stands for.
I don't.
It's mom. If you can't explain it to your mother, You're not ready to explain it to your employees and end users. Thinking about the business case in terms of straightforward benefits, what's in it for me, and making it easily explainable to non-technical users is perhaps the most important step in making sure that you don't just have a business case that proves value or justifies budget, but that motivates your entire organization to embrace the change, to embrace the opportunity for technology. So a couple of best practices I want to share. Focus on benefits, not features. Often when people are looking at HR technology, they go through the sort of checklist of features and functions. While certainly there are core features and capabilities that are important, a business case should be focused on what's the benefit for those different groups of users, not on particular features and capabilities. As I said before, the best business case focuses on just a few metrics. You can use the 4 Ps. Remember, people, process, price, and potential as your guide to identify what are the top areas of potential benefit where you want to focus your business case, focus quantifying your benefits, and focus your adoption outside the organization. Remember, you're going to have to look outside HR. For a lot of these HR agility technology investments, you're looking at the benefit for managers, the benefit for a broader employee base. You can use those zero data estimation techniques that we talked about to do a good job of estimating conservatively and credibly what those benefits are likely to be outside HR without having to do a big study or survey of employees, and having a credible business case based on credible, reasonable estimates. You want to make sure you're using that business case for more than just budget approval. Building it is really to be your guide for training, communication, and adoption efforts moving forward. And finally, remember mom. The most important piece about a business case is being able to explain it in a way that everyone can understand and embrace. And that will help you ensure that you don't just get budget, but you have a project that in technology that is embraced by your employees. Well, we've covered a lot of ground really quickly today, but I want to thank everybody for your attention, and I think we're ready to open up for questions, Thomas.
Yeah, maybe while people are typing into the chat box, maybe I have a question from my experience. What, and yours experience as well, how do you see the recent trends regarding the business case? We see more and more people involved into the business case itself, where you see finance, FP&A, HR. So it's not only about HR, right? It's about almost everyone that is touching HR that is involved. What's your experience on the recent trends regarding these?
Yeah, I would say two things happening, Thomas. First, it sort of goes like this, right? When people get more conservative about spending, more people get involved in every budget decision. But I think the other thing we're seeing in the positive side of this is we're now seeing HR technologies investments that are not just about HR, right? It's not just about automating internal HR process. It's about enabling employees to be more productive, to managers to have more visibility, to employees to have a better experience. So by nature, we're talking about benefits that span the entire organization, not just HR anymore. And that tends to get more people involved, but also drives more people to want to have visibility into the process, into the opportunity, and how the technology is going to impact not just the HR department, but the entire organization.
Okay, so you're saying that the more people are involved, the more people can recognize themselves in the business case, the more compelling it can be,
That's
essentially,
right.
towards the leadership or any
And the more
decision-making
opportunity
people.
you have to get buy-in to the business case before the technology ever gets deployed. So it becomes less of a somebody else did this and now I have to use it, and more of a we made the strategic decision to make this investment and now I get to use it.
And okay, thanks for sharing. I don't know if anyone in the audience has additional questions. Otherwise, I'm asking. And kind of following up this question,
Yeah.
what about if we see resistance from the finance and the IT? And when you present the business case. And again, I might be the pessimistic in the room, but it's just to see how do we make sure that they are on board?
Yeah. I mean, there are always going to be politics involved, right? When you're presenting a case. And certainly with any new technology, you're going to get some pushback. I found with both finance and IT, though, that two things, presenting the productivity potential as math that we talked about with a correction coefficient. Finance loves math, right? And so does IT.
Yeah.
So it enables them to get in and actually see the numbers. They may want to adjust productivity coefficients, and that's okay. But what you've done is engage them in a process that looks much more like what finance does on a regular basis in a spreadsheet than just putting together benefit estimates in a slide deck. I think too, you have to recognize that in HR, we tend to get very locked up about having perfect data. In finance, they're making decisions about investments all the time based on expected and worst case scenarios, right? If I'm thinking about building a new business, building a new building as an organization, I don't know exactly how much it's going to cost me to build that building. I don't know exactly how long it's going to take me to build that building. I also don't know exactly how much more productive my organization is going to be if I have a new building, a new facility. What I'm doing is taking the best data that I have, making estimates, and then saying, based on those estimates, do I have a good business case to move forward? We have to recognize that finance is used to doing this all the time. So doing that sort of expected and worst case measurement is something that they're really comfortable with. And that's something I think HR, when we're building business cases, we need to get more comfortable with as well.
Yeah, it's a kind of a scenario plan, conservative, more like aggressive one. I think it definitely makes sense. Maybe for the audience, I would be curious to understand what's your biggest takeaway from today. I think it was definitely valuable, very concrete example. Would you do something different? Have you learned something that you could say, I could apply that? So I'd be really curious to hear some feedback as well. And if you could, maybe for the audience, Rebecca, and then I will let the audience ask if you could give just one piece of advice for someone that wants to start building a business case, don't know where to start. What is the good starting point?
I think be brave. Don't be afraid to sort of write down what you think all of the potential benefits are, and then use those 4 Ps to say, really, if I take emotion out of this, where are the areas that I'm likely to get the biggest benefit for my organization? Because I think sometimes we get overwhelmed, particularly when we're thinking about big HR transformation projects, and we think, well, it's going to affect managers, and it's going to affect turnover, and it's going to affect HR, and it's going to affect all finance, and it's going to affect all these different areas. Where do I even start? Right? If you do that sort of laundry list of potential areas of impact and then rate them in terms of the 4 Ps on a scale of 1 to 5, you put some structure and math behind it so you know really where to focus and it becomes less overwhelming.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if these questions, but if not, Rebecca, I would like to thank you very much for your time and your knowledge that you shared with the audience. And again, if you have additional questions or points you would like to clarify, you have the Bob's team, you have also Rebecca's email address, you have the whole Valoir team as well that they can support you as well in this exercise. And
Right.
I wish you a good day or rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.